You broke it. So what? He's just a child. Buy my son a new tablet right now or you'll regret it. The scream echoed through my living room, vibrating in my chest. I stared at the floor, my heart sinking. There it was, my brand new iPad Pro, the one I'd saved for 6 months to buy, lying in a spiderweb of shattered glass. My 7-year-old nephew, Leo, stood over it, still holding the Apple Pencil like a tiny plastic dagger. "Brenda," I whispered, my voice shaking with a mix of shock and pure rage. "That was my workstation. I have a deadline tonight that's $1,500 on the floor." My sister-in-law didn't even flinch. She didn't look at the wreckage. She didn't look at her son. She looked at me with eyes full of cold, calculated entitlement. "Oh, please, stop being so dramatic," she snapped, waving a hand dismissively. "It's just a piece of plastic. You have plenty of money. Look at this place. You can afford 10 of those. But look at Leo. He's crying. You scared him by shouting." Leo wasn't crying. He was smirking behind his mother's back. He knew exactly what he'd done. He'd been eyeing my desk all afternoon, and the second I stepped away to grab a coffee, he'd struck. "I didn't shout, Brenda. I gasped because your son just destroyed my livelihood," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You need to pay for this, or at least help me get it repaired immediately." Brenda's face turned a deep, ugly shade of purple. She stepped into my personal space, her finger inches from my nose. "I'm not paying for anything," she bellowed. "In fact, you're going to make this right. Leo wanted to play games, and now he can't because your work toy is broken. You're going to take us to the Apple Store right now, and you're going to buy him his own tablet, a better one. Consider it an apology for your attitude." I looked at my brother, Mark, who was standing in the doorway. He looked exhausted. He looked defeated. But most of all, he looked away. "Mark, a little help here?" I pleaded. Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. "Sis, just do it. It's easier this way. You know how Brenda gets. Just buy the kid a cheap one or something. You're making a big deal out of nothing." My own brother, my own blood. He was choosing her madness over my reality. "Nothing?" I asked, a cold realization settling in. "This is how it's going to be?" Brenda saw my hesitation as weakness. A predatory smile crept across her lips. She turned toward my desk, where my external hard drive, the one containing 3 years of portfolio work and my current project, was plugged in. She grabbed the cable. "I'm going to count to 3, she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous hiss. "Either we go to the store right now or I see if this little black box is as fragile as the last one." Her hand tightened. She began to pull. "1, Brenda said, her knuckles turning white. The external drive emitted a soft, rhythmic hum, the sound of my entire professional life spinning at 7,200 RPM. Inside that little black box were 3 years of sweat, tears, and every single project that defined my career. "Brenda, stop," I said, my voice low and trembling. "That drive has my client's original footage. If that data is corrupted, I'm not just out of a job. I'm getting sued for breach of contract." I looked at Mark, my brother, the person who used to protect me from bullies in middle school. "Mark, tell her. This isn't a game. That's my life." Mark didn't move. He didn't even look up. He stared at his sneakers like they were the most interesting thing in the world. "Just give her what she wants, Sarah. You've always been the successful one. You can afford to be generous for once. Don't be so selfish." Generous? I was being extorted in my own living room. 2, Brenda barked. Leo started giggling. It was a high-pitched, mocking sound that grated on my nerves. He wasn't a scared child. He was a spectator at a gladiator match, and he was rooting for the lion. He knew his mother would burn the world down to get him a new toy. I felt a cold sweat prickle my neck. My mind raced. If I lunged for her, she'd drop it. If I agreed, I'd be teaching this monster that she could hold my life hostage whenever she felt like it. "Brenda, okay, let's talk about this. I'll take you to the store. Just put the drive down." She smirked. She saw the fear in my eyes and she feasted on it, but she didn't put it down. The Apple store is 30 minutes away, she said, her voice dripping with venom. And I don't like your tone. You need to apologize. To Leo, on your knees. Tell him you're sorry for being a mean auntie. My blood went from boiling to freezing. This wasn't about a tablet anymore. This was about total, absolute humiliation. I am not apologizing to a child for him breaking my things, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. 3. She didn't just pull the cable. She yanked the entire drive off the desk and threw it across the room with all her might. I watched in slow motion as the sleek black casing sailed through the air. It hit the hardwood floor with a sickening metallic crack and slid under the heavy oak cabinet. The room went silent. The humming stopped. Brenda looked at me, her chest heaving, a manic glint in her eyes. Oops, I guess my hand slipped. Now, are we going shopping? Or do I need to start looking at what's on your computer next? I didn't move. I didn't scream. I felt something inside me snap. Something much more important than a hard drive. Mark, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Get her out of my house, now. Not until she gets the tablet, Brenda screamed. Mark, tell her. Mark finally stepped forward, but not to help me. He grabbed my arm, his grip uncomfortably tight. Sarah, don't be a bitch. It's just a drive. You probably have backups. Just go to the store and end this nightmare so we can all go home. He was shaking me. My own brother was physically trying to force me out the door of my own home. Suddenly, there was a heavy knock at the front door. Not a friendly knock. A command. I wrenched my arm away from Mark and pulled the door open. 2 men in dark suits stood there, looking stern. One of them held up a gold badge. Sarah Miller? He asked. Yes, I whispered. We're with the Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division. We have a warrant to seize all financial records and electronic devices belonging to your brother, Mark Miller, and his wife, Brenda. Brenda's face went from purple to a ghostly, translucent white. She didn't look so brave anymore. Wait, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. What did they do? The agent stepped into the house, his eyes locking onto Brenda. It's not what they did, Ms. Miller. It's what they've been hiding for the last 4 years. And we think you might have been helping them. Helping them? The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I looked at Mark. He wasn't looking at the agents. He was looking at the oak cabinet, the spot where my broken hard drive lay shattered. I haven't done anything, I stammered, my heart racing. I barely talked to them. They broke into my house today to harass me for a tablet. The lead agent, a man with eyes as cold as a winter morning, didn't blink. He pulled a tablet from his briefcase. We've tracked 42 offshore transfers originating from your home IP address, Sarah. Over $600,000 in the last 18 months, all funneled into an account under your name. My head spun. 600,000? I struggled to pay my rent last winter while Mark was buying Brenda a new SUV. Mark? I turned to him, my voice cracking. What did you do? Mark's face shifted. The clueless brother act vanished. He didn't look like my brother anymore. He looked like a cornered predator. I didn't do anything, Sarah, he hissed, stepping toward me. You're the one who handles the tech stuff. Remember? You set up the encrypted tunnels. You told me it was a tax loophole. I just trusted you. The lie hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't just hiding. He was pinning the entire operation on me, right in front of the feds. He's lying, I screamed, pointing at him. He uses my guest Wi-Fi whenever he visits. I didn't set up anything. Agent Miller stepped further into the room, his boots heavy on the hardwood. We'll let the forensics team decide that. Where are the devices? Specifically, the high-speed external drive we tracked to this location 10 minutes ago. My heart stopped. The drive. Brenda's eyes darted to the cabinet. A cruel, terrified smile touched her lips. She realized what she'd done. She hadn't just broken my career, she'd destroyed the one piece of evidence that could prove who was actually logging into those accounts. Or worse, She'd made it look like I'd destroyed evidence the moment I saw the badges. It's under there, I whispered, my hand shaking. The agent knelt down, pulling the mangled black box from the shadows. He looked at the cracked casing, the severed cable, and then at me. "Attempting to destroy federal evidence is a felony, Sarah," he said, his voice dropping an octave. A very serious one. "I didn't break it, she did," I yelled, but Brenda was already sobbing. Perfect, practiced crocodile tears. "She's lost her mind," Brenda wailed, clinging to Mark. "She saw you through the window and threw it. She told us she'd kill us if we told you about the special files." I stared at them, horrified. They weren't just relatives. They were a professional, lying team. Agent Miller stood up and signaled to his partner. "Bag it and get the laptop. We're taking everything." Then he turned back to me. "There's one more thing, Sarah. We didn't just come here for the money laundering. We found something else on your server during the remote sweep, something that involves your high-profile client." The air left the room. My client? The politician? What did you find?" The agent leaned in so close I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "The footage you've been editing isn't a campaign ad, Sarah. It's a recorded confession. And the man in that video, he was found dead an hour ago." Dead? The word didn't just hang in the air, it suffocated me. My lungs forgot how to work. I had spent 72 hours meticulously cleaning the audio and color grading the face of a man who was now a corpse. I wasn't just an editor anymore. In the eyes of the law, I was a digital forensic cleaner for a political assassination. Mark stepped closer to the agent, his voice a low, rehearsed whisper. "She's been acting strange for months, officer. Locked doors, secret phone calls in the middle of the night. I thought it was just the stress of her freelance work. I had no idea she was part of something like this." "You're lying!" I lunged toward him, my world blurring with rage, but Miller's partner caught my arm, pinning it behind my back with practiced ease. "Easy, Sarah," the partner barked. "Don't make this a resisting charge on top of everything else." "He's the one," I screamed, the walls of my own home feeling like they were closing in. "Look at his accounts. Look at the SUV Brenda is driving. I can barely afford my grocery bills. Does this look like the house of a woman with $600,000? Brenda let out a sharp, hysterical laugh, clutching Mark's arm. "Because you're frugal, Sarah. That's what you told us. You said you were hiding the money for a rainy day. Is this it? Is this your rainy day? A dead senator and a bag full of blood money?" Senator. The client was a senator. My stomach turned over. I hadn't just been working for a politician. I had been working for a man whose face was currently plastered across every news channel in the country. Agent Miller ignored the screaming. He was staring at the mangled, broken drive on the floor. "The drive is toast, but the server logs don't lie. We've been running a mirror on your connection for 3 hours. Every upload, every encrypted message, every byte of data, it all originates from this desk, from your hands." He pulled out a pair of steel handcuffs. The sound of the ratcheting metal was the loudest thing in the room. "Sarah, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and destruction of federal evidence." "Wait," I gasped, my eyes darting to my workstation. The twin monitors were supposed to be in sleep mode. They should have been black. But the cooling fans were suddenly screaming. The CPU was redlining, the internal lights of the computer tower pulsing a frantic, angry crimson. "I'm not touching it," I whispered, terror replaced by a cold, mechanical dread. "I'm not doing anything." Miller paused, his hand hovering over my wrist. He looked at the monitors. A progress bar appeared in the center of the screen. It was at 98%, uploading to public domain. The file name made my blood turn to ice. confession_statement_Sarah_final.mp4. "Stop it," I yelled, struggling against the agent's grip. "I didn't make that. I've never seen that file." Mark's face didn't show fear. For a split second, the mask slipped, and I saw a terrifying hidden triumph. He wasn't just framing me for the money, he was making me the face of the entire conspiracy. The bar hit 100%. My phone, sitting on the kitchen counter, began to vibrate uncontrollably. Not one notification, not 10, hundreds. A tidal wave of digital noise. I looked at the screen from across the room. It was a news alert from a major network. Breaking. Assassin of Senator Vance identifies herself in leaked video. Sarah Miller, a local film editor, claims responsibility and warns of more to come. I didn't do it, I choked out. It's a deep fake. They're using my own software to... Before I could finish, the front door didn't just open. It was blown off its hinges. But the men storming through the smoke weren't wearing FBI jackets. They weren't wearing any insignia at all. They wore tactical masks and carried suppressed rifles, and the first thing they did wasn't to shout for our surrender. The lead man leveled his weapon directly at Agent Miller's chest and pulled the trigger. The thud of Agent Miller's body hitting the floor was the last sound of the world I knew. There was no shout for surrender. No police, drop your weapons. Just the rhythmic, metallic thud of suppressed gunfire. Miller's partner didn't even reach his holster. A red bloom erupted on his forehead, and he slumped against the wall, sliding down like a discarded rag doll. I was still handcuffed, pinned to the floor by the weight of a dead man's arm. I was a tethered goat in a room full of wolves. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the roar of my own pulse. I expected to be next. I closed my eyes, waiting for the cold sting of lead. But it didn't come. I opened them to see Mark. He wasn't cowering. He wasn't screaming. He stood perfectly still as one of the masked men stepped toward him. My husband, the man I'd shared a bed with for 5 years, reached out and calmly took a fresh handgun from the mercenary's tactical vest. "Check the server," Mark said. His voice was different, cold, aristocratic. "Make sure the upload is mirrored to the darknets. If she dies before the narrative takes hold, the whole thing falls apart." Brenda wasn't crying anymore either. She was wiping Miller's blood off her cheek with a designer silk scarf, her eyes as vacant as a shark's. "We need to move, Mark. The local PD will be here in 4 minutes." The neighbors called in the door breach. The lead gunman turned his mask toward me. His lenses were black pits. He didn't see a person. He saw a task to be completed. He walked to my workstation, pulled a small incendiary device from his belt, and slapped it onto the side of my computer tower. "Wait!" I choked out, my voice cracking. "Why? You have the money. You have the video." Mark walked over to me. He knelt down, gripping my chin so hard I felt my jaw creak. "The world needs a villain, Sarah. A lone wolf. A radicalized digital ghost who lost her mind and killed a patriot. You're not just a fall girl. You're the finale." He stood up and signaled to the men. "Burn it all. Make sure she's found in the ashes with the weapon." They turned to leave, Mark not even looking back at the woman he once called his wife. But as the lead gunman pivoted to exit, a small object slipped from his tactical pouch. It skittered across the hardwood floor, stopping inches from my hand. It was a plastic-encased ID card. I squinted through the rising smoke, my heart stopping as I recognized the face on the badge. It wasn't a mercenary, it wasn't a hitman. It was the dead senator. And the security clearance on the card was issued 6 hours after his reported time of death. The timer on the incendiary device on my computer began to beep. 5 seconds. Then my phone, still lying on the counter, chirped with a new text. Not from a news site, not from a bot. It was from my own number. "Don't hold your breath," the message read. "Look under the floorboard." 4, 3. The digital beep of the incendiary device wasn't a sound. It was a pulse, thumping in time with the terror in my chest. I didn't have time to process the senator's face on that badge. I didn't have time to wonder how I was texting myself from the future. I only had the weight of Agent Miller's corpse and the jagged edge of a floorboard that looked exactly like every other plank in the room. 2. I lunged. My handcuffed wrists screamed as I used Miller's dead weight as a pivot, swinging my body toward the scuffed wood. I didn't use my hands. I used my heels. I kicked with a desperation that shattered the wood. The plank didn't just break. It flipped. One. I dove into the narrow gap just as the computer tower turned into a miniature sun. The roar wasn't an explosion. It was a hiss. A blinding magnesium-white flare turned the office into a furnace. The heat licked at my hair, the smell of ozone and melting silicon instantly sickening. But it wasn't the fire that was meant to kill me. As the server melted, a thick pressurized cloud of emerald green gas hissed from a canister hidden inside the casing. "Don't hold your breath," the text had said. I realized the irony too late. The gas wasn't meant to suffocate. It was a catalyst. I pulled the oxygen mask from the vacuum-sealed bag in the floorboard, pressing it to my face just as the first wisp of green touched my skin. It burned like acid. My vision blurred. Through the haze, I saw the ID card I'd spotted earlier, the dead senator. He wasn't just alive. He was standing in the doorway, but it wasn't the senator. It was a man wearing the senator's face, literally. He reached up to his neck, peeling back a layer of hyper-realistic silicone. Beneath the mask of a murdered patriot was a face I had seen every day for the last year on the morning news. The vice president. He looked at the burning room, at the slumped bodies of the agents, and then directly into the gap in the floor where I lay trembling. He didn't see me, but he smiled as if he knew exactly where the lone wolf was hiding. He pulled a phone from his pocket. "The asset is neutralized," he said into the receiver. "Begin the broadcast. Tell the world she did it for the opposition." My phone vibrated in my hand. Another text from my own number. I looked down, my heart stopping. It wasn't a message this time. It was a live feed of a room I recognized instantly. It was a nursery, my daughter's nursery. And in the video, Brenda was standing over the crib, holding a syringe filled with that same shimmering green liquid. Then, the voice came through my phone speakers, my own voice, perfectly synthesized, cold and detached. "Target locked," my voice said. "Executing the final witness now." I looked up. The vice president was gone. The sirens outside weren't police. They were the cleanup crew, and they weren't carrying handcuffs. They were carrying body bags with my name already stitched onto the tags. But then, the floorboard beneath me shifted again. There wasn't just a survival kit down here. There was a secondary hatch. I pushed it open, dropping into a crawl space that smelled of damp earth and old copper. I crawled, my hands scraping against cold metal until I hit a dead end. Except it wasn't a wall. It was a screen. A wall of monitors flickered to life in the dark. Hundreds of them, all showing different angles of my life. My kitchen, my bedroom, my car. And in the center of the wall, a single folder was open. Its title, Project MARK, Replacement Protocol. I clicked the first file. It wasn't a document, it was a medical chart. A chart for a heart transplant, dated 5 years ago. The donor, the real Mark. The recipient, the man currently standing in my house. The door to the crawl space above me slammed open. A pair of heavy tactical boots hit the floorboards. "Sarah?" a voice whispered. It was Mark. But it wasn't his voice anymore. It was a perfect, chilling imitation of my father's voice, a man who had been dead for 20 years. "I know you're in the walls, Butterfly. Did you really think you were the only one playing a character?" He leaned down, his face appearing in the hatch, illuminated by the glow of the monitors. He wasn't wearing his wedding ring anymore. He was holding a remote detonator. "The house doesn't just burn, Sarah," he smiled. "It vanishes, along with the server and the girl in the crib." He pressed the button, but instead of an explosion, a sound echoed from the monitors behind me, the sound of a baby crying. And then, a new voice broke through the static. "Mark," the voice said, "you're late for your own funeral." The detonator clicked, a hollow mechanical snap that should have ended my world. But the house didn't vanish. The air didn't turn to fire. Instead, every monitor in the crawlspace turned blood red. Mark, or the thing wearing his skin, froze. His thumb was still pressed hard against the button, his knuckles white. The chilling imitation of my father's voice died in his throat. "System override," the monitors chimed in unison. The live feed of the nursery shifted. The camera zoomed out, revealing that the walls weren't wood and wallpaper. They were reinforced steel. My daughter wasn't in a house. She was in a vault. And Brenda? She wasn't holding a syringe anymore. She was staring at the camera, her face as expressionless as a mannequin, waiting for a command. "The heart you carry, Mark. It has a kill switch." The voice from the speakers purred. It was the senator, the real one. No masks. No silicone. "Did you think we'd give a stray dog the keys to the kingdom without a leash?" I watched the screen as a map of a human chest appeared. A small glowing red dot pulsed right where Mark's stolen heart beat. Mark let out a strangled gasp. He dropped the detonator and clutched his chest, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. He collapsed to his knees right above the hatch, looking down at me. For the first time, the predatory mask was gone. He looked terrified. He looked human. "Sarah," he wheezed, blood beginning to leak from his ears. "Run. It's not a replacement. It's a harvest." Before I could move, the screen in front of me flickered again. A new file opened. Subject 0, Sarah. I saw my own medical records. My birth wasn't a birth. It was a delivery from a laboratory. My entire life, the marriage, the career, the child, was a controlled experiment. My daughter wasn't just a victim. She was the successful version 2.0. "The asset is ready for collection," the senator's voice announced. Suddenly, the wall behind me hissed. A hidden hydraulic door slid open, revealing a tunnel flooded with cold blue light. At the end stood 3 figures in hazmat suits, holding a containment unit shaped like a cradle. But that wasn't the worst part. I looked back at the monitor showing the nursery. The Brenda figure reached up to her face. She didn't peel off a mask. She unzipped her skin. Underneath was me, another Sarah, identical in every way. The other Sarah looked into the camera and blew a kiss. "Goodbye, prototype," she whispered. Then the floor of the crawl space began to tilt. I wasn't in a basement. I was in a cargo hold. I felt the gut-wrenching lurch of an airplane taking off. I scrambled for the hatch, but Mark's body slumped over the opening, his dead weight sealing me in. Through the cracks, I saw his eyes roll back. They were glowing with that same emerald green liquid. His hand reached down, gripping my throat with a strength no human should possess. "Sarah," the corpse whispered, "we need your eyes for the next one." The light in the crawl space died. Then the screaming started, but it wasn't mine. It was coming from thousands of speakers across the city. My voice broadcasting a confession I never made for a crime that was about to happen. The screen in front of me flashed one final message. Detonation in T-minus 60 seconds. Target: the White House. The plane banked hard. I wasn't the witness. I was the missile. 59 seconds. The digital numbers on the monitor didn't just blink. They pulsed like a heartbeat. My heartbeat. Mark's fingers were like frozen iron pincers buried in my windpipe. His dead eyes, swirling with that toxic emerald light, stared through me. He wasn't just a corpse anymore. He was a biological lock, and his weight was the key keeping me trapped in this flying coffin. "Sarah," the corpse rasped again, the voice vibrating from deep within its chest, not its throat. "Don't fight. The transition is easier if you're still." I didn't listen. I slammed my heel into his shattered jaw. Once. Twice. On the third strike, bone gave way, and the grip loosened just enough for me to gasp in a lungful of pressurized air. I scrambled backward, hitting the cold metal of the containment unit. Beyond the fuselage, I could hear the roar of the engine screaming at maximum thrust. We were diving. Fast. Suddenly, the speakers in the cargo hold crackled to life. It wasn't the senator, it was my voice. My own voice, clear and trembling with a grief I hadn't felt yet, broadcasting to every television, every radio, and every smartphone in the Capitol below. "I am Sarah Miller," the broadcast sobbed, "and today I take back the future they stole from me. The White House will burn, and from its ashes a new order will rise. For my daughter, for the prototype." My stomach turned. They weren't just killing me, they were erasing my soul, replacing my legacy with the face of a monster. I looked up at the monitor. The other Sarah, the one who had unzipped her skin, was sitting in my living room holding my daughter. She looked into the lens and winked. She wasn't just a clone, she was an upgrade. 30 seconds, the system chimed. The 3 figures in hazmat suits moved. They didn't walk, they glided. As they approached the blue light of the containment unit, the lead figure reached up and pulled back his hood. I stopped breathing. It was Mark, not the broken, leaking thing slumped over the hatch, but a perfect, pristine version of him, and behind him stood my mother and my father, all of them wearing the same vacant, predatory smile. "The family is finally together, Sarah," the pristine Mark said, his voice a perfect melody. "But there's only room for one of each, and you're the last of the old blood." He tapped the side of the containment unit. The glass hissed open. Inside wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a weapon. It was a chair. A surgical chair surrounded by 1,000 microneedles, all dripping with that glowing green liquid. "The plane isn't the missile, Sarah," the senator's voice boomed over the intercom, laughing now. "You are. The moment we hit the target, your body will become a pressurized dispersal unit. Every soul in that city will be infected with the new strain. They won't die. They'll just change. Like we did." The plane leveled out. The scream of the wind told me we were seconds from impact. I looked at the screen. We were hovering directly over the south lawn. I lunged for the manual override lever, but the pristine Mark caught my wrist. His skin felt like warm plastic. "Wait," he whispered, pointing to the countdown. "Look closer." The timer reached 05, 04, 03, and then it stopped. The screen turned black. A single line of white text appeared. "Authentication required. Retinal scan initiated." A laser swept across my eyes, burning with a white-hot intensity. "The bomb doesn't go off if you're dead, Sarah." Mark smiled, showing teeth that were far too sharp. "It only goes off if you're watching." I felt the floor drop. The cargo doors beneath us began to grind open, revealing the dark, sprawling silhouette of the White House rushing up to meet us. But as the wind whipped into the hold, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. There wasn't just one plane. Behind us, emerging from the clouds, were hundreds of identical drones, all banking toward different cities across the globe. "Sarah," the other Sarah whispered directly into my ear through my own neural implant. "Do you want to see what happens when the world unzips its skin?" The plane hit the first security spire. The metal groaned. The glass of the containment unit shattered. But I didn't die. I felt my skin begin to itch. A deep, rhythmic thumping started in my chest, a second heartbeat faster and stronger than my own. I looked down at my hands. The veins were turning emerald green. And then, the voice of my daughter came over the speakers. But she wasn't crying. "Mommy," she said, her voice distorted by 1,000 overlapping frequencies. "Why are you still inside that skin? It looks so tight." I reached for my face, my fingernails digging into my own forehead, and realized with a jolt of pure horror. There was a zipper. The zipper wasn't cold metal, it was bone. I pulled. Not because I wanted to, but because the thing growing underneath was suffocating. My skin didn't tear. It peeled away like wet silk. The air in the cabin hit my raw, new nerves, and it didn't hurt. It felt like waking up from a lifelong coma. Crunch. The nose of the plane didn't explode against the south lawn. It bypassed the stone and glass, slicing through the White House roof like a needle into a vein. We didn't stop. We slid deep into the belly of the building, the wings shearing off, the fuselage becoming a silver bullet aimed at the heart of the Capitol. Silence followed. Not the silence of death, but the silence of a tomb waiting to be opened. 5 stars, Sarah. The senator's voice whispered through the wreckage. He wasn't on the intercom anymore. He was standing in the ruins of the Oval Office, peering through the jagged hole our plane had punched in his ceiling. The delivery is on time. I crawled out of the shattered containment unit. My old skin hung off my shoulders like a discarded coat. I looked at my hands. They were translucent, glowing with a soft, bioluminescent pulse. I wasn't human. I was a biological weapon. The pristine Mark stepped over the debris. He didn't look at me with love. He looked at me with hunger. "The drones are waiting for your signal," he said. "I won't give it," I choked out. But my voice didn't sound like me. It sounded like a choir of 1,000 clicking insects. Mark laughed, a wet, rattling sound. He pointed to the monitors still flickering in the wreckage. On the screen, the other Sarah was no longer holding my daughter. She was standing behind her, her hands resting on the girl's small shoulders. "You don't understand, Sarah," Mark whispered. "You aren't the pilot. You're the battery. And your daughter? She's the remote." On the screen, my 7-year-old girl turned toward the camera. Her eyes weren't brown anymore. They were solid, shimmering emerald. She reached up to her own forehead. She found the bridge of her nose. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice echoing through the global broadcast. "It's too tight. Can you help me take it off?" She didn't wait for an answer. She gripped the skin of her face and began to pull. I screamed, lunging for the screen, but my new body betrayed me. My second heart gave a violent tectonic thud. Across the globe, on 1,000 radar screens, the hundreds of drones responded. They didn't dive. They opened. "Look at the sky, Sarah," the senator gasped, tears of green fluid streaming down his face. "The rain is starting." I looked up through the hole in the roof. The sky over D.C. was turning a bruised, oily purple as millions of tiny winged shapes began to pour out of the drones. And then, my daughter's face on the screen finished peeling. I stared at what lay beneath her skin, and for the first time, I didn't want to save the world. I wanted to help it burn, because the thing under her skin wasn't a monster, it was a timer, and it was counting down from 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. 0 didn't bring an explosion. It brought a frequency. The world didn't end with a bang. It ended with a hum, a vibration so deep it felt like the Earth's core was resetting its heartbeat. On the screen, the light radiating from my daughter's peeled face wasn't fire. It was data. Raw emerald code pouring into the retinas of every human being glued to their devices. Billions of people were being updated in a single heartbeat. "Synchronization complete," the senator whispered. He collapsed, his body folding like an empty suit of clothes. I felt my second heart, the one that wasn't human, give a final, agonizing surge. I wasn't just a battery, I was the Wi-Fi router for the apocalypse. The bioluminescence under my translucent skin flared, turning the Oval Office into a blinding white void. "Stop it!" I shrieked. But my voice was no longer a sound. It was a broadcast. Outside, the silver mist released by the drones didn't settle. It solidified. It turned the atmosphere into a massive, liquid crystal mirror. For a moment, the entire population of Washington, D.C. looked up and saw themselves reflected in the sky. But they didn't see humans. In the reflection, every person standing on the street was already unzipped. They saw the glowing, skeletal things they were becoming. The other Sarah leaned into the camera, her image flickering across the silver sky like a goddess of the new age. "The world is a blank hard drive, Sarah," she said, her voice echoing from the clouds, "and we just hit format." The senator's body on the floor began to twitch. His skin didn't just peel, it evaporated. Something sleek, dark, and multi-limbed began to slide out of his throat, using his rib cage as a ladder. He wasn't dying. He was being replaced. "The countdown wasn't for a bomb," Mark said, his eyes now solid pools of green light. "It was an eviction notice." I looked up through the shattered roof. The silver mirror of the sky began to ripple. Something was pushing through from the other side. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't an alien fleet. It was a finger. A single, colossal, pale finger, the size of a skyscraper, pressing down against the fabric of our reality. And then, another. A hand was reaching through the sky, prepared to pick up the White House like a toy. "They aren't here to destroy us," Mark whispered, his voice full of a terrifying, holy awe. "They're here to collect the harvest." The giant thumb touched the ground a mile away, and the shock wave didn't knock me down. It pulled the soul right out of my chest. Then, the other Sarah on the screen pointed directly at me. "But there's one soul that doesn't belong in the harvest, Sarah. Yours is the only one with a delete key." The giant hand began to close around the city, and my daughter's voice screamed from the sky, "Mommy, why are you turning red?" I looked at my hands. The emerald glow was gone. They were burning with a color I had never seen before, a color that made the shadows scream. The red wasn't light. It was a hole in reality. Where the emerald code was a language, this red was an eraser. I looked at the senator's new, multi-limbed body as it lunged toward me, its mandibles clicking with a sound like breaking glass. I didn't move. I didn't have to. As his claw touched the red aura, it didn't bleed. It didn't break. It simply ceased. 1 second, his arm was there, a terrifying work of bioorganic engineering. The next, there was a clean, jagged gap in space where his limb used to be. No sparks, no dust, just a void that tasted like ozone and forgotten memories. "You're not deleting them, Sarah," Mark whispered, backing away, his own green eyes flickering with a new, primal fear. "You're deleting the very idea of them." The giant hand above us paused. The skyscraper-sized fingers, pale and smooth as marble, hovered inches from the roof. The air between us and the hand began to scream. It was the sound of a billion voices suddenly realizing they were about to be unwritten. The other Sarah on the screen stopped smiling, her digital face distorted, her emerald eyes widening into black pits. "The fail-safe," she hissed. Her voice didn't echo from the clouds anymore. It vibrated inside my teeth. "You were never the battery. You were the poison pill. If we couldn't have the harvest, the architects ensured no one would." The red glow intensified. It was spreading from my skin to the floor, to the walls. Everywhere the red touched, the world turned into a gray, featureless static. The White House was dissolving into white noise. "Stop it!" I tried to grab my own arms, but my hands passed through each other. I was becoming the void. Outside, the giant hand didn't retreat. It clenched into a fist. The pressure was soul-crushing. The silver sky cracked like a dropped mirror, and through the shards, I didn't see space. I didn't see stars. I saw a face so vast it stretched from horizon to horizon, looking down at our world through a cosmic microscope. And that face was weeping. "Mommy." I turned. My daughter was standing in the center of the Oval Office. She wasn't glowing green, she wasn't glowing red. She was just a little girl in a torn dress, holding a stuffed rabbit. But as she stepped toward me, the rabbit fell to the floor. It didn't hit the ground. It kept falling. It fell through the floor, through the earth, through the static. "Mommy, look!" she cried, pointing at the giant eye in the sky. I looked, and that's when I saw it. Inside the pupil of the cosmic eye, there was a reflection. It wasn't our world. It was a nursery. a giant celestial room where billions of tiny glowing jars sat on shelves. One of the jars was tipped over. It was leaking a blue liquid, and we were inside the puddle. "The harvest isn't for food," I whispered, the realization hitting me harder than the giant fist. "It's a cleanup crew." The giant fist began to descend, not to pick us up, but to wipe the floor. Then my daughter reached out and touched the red light surrounding me. She didn't disappear. The red turned gold. The girl smiled, but her teeth were made of the same silver mist that was suffocating the world. "Don't worry, Mommy," she said, her voice sounding like 1,000 bells. "I found the undo button." She pressed her palm against my chest, and the world didn't just stop. It began to play in reverse. The senator's limbs crawled back into his throat. The shattered roof flew back together. The giant hand retracted into the sky. But as the clock rewound, I saw something that wasn't supposed to be there. In the reverse blur of time, I saw myself. Not here. Not in the White House. I saw myself lying on a metal table 300 years ago, with a group of men in lab coats standing over me. And one of them was Mark. He wasn't my husband. He was holding a scalpel. "Subject 001 is reacting," the passmark said, looking directly into the camera of my memory. "Initiate the mother protocol." The rewinding stopped. I wasn't in the Oval Office anymore. I was in a dark, cold room strapped to a chair. The other Sarah was standing in front of me, but she wasn't a digital ghost. She was flesh and blood. She leaned in close and whispered, "Welcome back, Sarah. You've been asleep for a very long time. Ready to tell us where you hid the real world?" The cold wasn't just a temperature. It was a weight. It pressed against my skin, smelling of antiseptic and ancient dust. I tried to scream, but my throat was a desert. My muscles felt like rusted cables. Looking down, I didn't see the glowing red aura or the digital veins of the simulation. I saw pale, shriveled skin and plastic tubes snaking into my veins, pumping a thick, neon blue fluid into my heart. "Don't try to speak," the woman said. She looked exactly like me, but older. Her face was a map of scars and exhaustion. She wasn't a digital other Sarah. She was the original. "The atrophy is severe. You've been in the cradle for 312 years. The door hissed open. A man stepped into the dim, clinical light. He wasn't wearing the tactical gear of a rebel or the suit of a senator. He wore a heavy, lead-lined coat. His hair was white, his eyes hidden behind thick, obsidian lenses. But I knew that gait. I knew the way he tilted his head. "Mark?" I rasped. The word felt like swallowing glass. He didn't rush to me. He didn't cry. He stood at the foot of my chair and checked a holographic display. "Pulse is stabilizing. The transition from the mother protocol was 98% successful." He looked at me then, but there was no love in those eyes, only the cold curiosity of a boy looking at an ant under a magnifying glass. "The world you just left, the green code, the giants, the senator, it was a stress test simulation," Mark said, his voice flat. "We needed to push your psyche to the absolute breaking point. We needed you to believe the universe was ending so you would finally reach for the fail-safe." "My daughter," I choked out. She was real." The woman, the older version of me, laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "She was a subroutine, Sarah, a psychological anchor designed to keep you from losing your mind while we mined your subconscious. But she did something she wasn't programmed to do. She showed you the nursery. She showed you the jars." Mark leaned in, his obsidian glasses reflecting my terrified face. "We aren't in a puddle, Sarah. We aren't being harvested by giants. We are on a dead rock orbiting a dying star. Mankind isn't being deleted. It's already gone. You are the last biological hard drive. You are carrying the consciousness of 8 billion people in the folds of your brain, encrypted behind a wall we can't break." He placed a cold metallic hand on my forehead. "The simulation was a failure," he whispered. "You didn't give us the key. You chose to undo the world instead of saving the data. So we have to go deeper. We have to strip away the mother protocol and see what's underneath the bone." He turned to the woman. "Increase the neuroload. If her brain fries, it fries. We're out of time. The sun enters its final phase in 6 hours." The woman hesitated, her hand hovering over a glowing lever. "If we do this, there's no coming back. She won't just forget the simulation. She'll forget she's human." "Do it," Mark snapped. As the woman pulled the lever, the room didn't dissolve into static. It didn't turn red. Suddenly, the lights in the lab flickered. A soft, rhythmic thumping began to echo through the walls. Thump, 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 thump. It sounded like a heartbeat that was too big for the room, too big for the planet. And then, from the corner of the dark room, a small, wet hand reached out and grabbed Mark's coat. I looked down. It was the stuffed rabbit from the simulation. It was soaked in blue liquid, and it was twitching. "Mommy said..." A voice whispered from the shadows, a voice that shouldn't exist in the real world. "Mommy said it's time to wake up for real now." The ceiling of the lab didn't crack. It began to bleed emerald code into the physical world. Mark stumbled back, his obsidian glasses sliding off his face. Behind them, there weren't eyes. There were 2 empty sockets glowing with the same cold, emerald light as the ceiling. "The containment. It's breached," old Sarah gasped. Her skin didn't just glitch, it began to peel away in long digital strips, revealing the rusted machinery of a life support android beneath. She wasn't the original me. She was just another layer of the lie, a caretaker program designed to look like a victim. The small, wet hand on Mark's coat tightened. The stuffed rabbit didn't just twitch, it unspooled. The fabric fibers turned into glistening optic cables, burrowing into Mark's sleeve, traveling up his arm. He tried to scream, but his voice was a distorted burst of static. "You said this was the real world," I screamed, the neon blue fluid in my veins beginning to boil. My skin felt like it was being scorched from the inside out. Mark didn't answer. He couldn't. His jaw was locked, his body vibrating at a frequency that shattered the glass vats around us. The real lab was melting. The clinical white walls were sagging like wet cardboard, revealing a horizon of endless, pulsing black towers beneath a sky that wasn't a sky. It was a motherboard the size of a galaxy. "There is no real anymore, Sarah," the voice of my daughter echoed, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "There is only the feed, and you are the only one who can't see the bars." The rhythmic thumping grew louder. Thump, 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 thump. It wasn't a heartbeat. It was the sound of a massive hydraulic press. The floor beneath my chair dissolved. I didn't fall into darkness. I fell into a sea of memories, 8 billion lives screaming at once, a tidal wave of data that threatened to erase my very soul. I saw every birth, every death, every first kiss of a civilization that had been dead for eons. As I plummeted through the data stream, I saw them, millions of chairs, just like mine, stretching into the infinite dark. And in every chair sat a version of me. Some were old, some were children, some weren't even human anymore. All of them were plugged into the same blue tubes. But then the falling stopped. I was standing in a field of perfectly white lilies. The air smelled of ozone and honey. In front of me stood the senator, but he wasn't a man anymore. He was a towering figure made of pure, blinding light, his features shifting between everyone I had ever loved. He held out a small silver key. "The stress test is over," he said, his voice vibrating in my marrow. But Mark was right about one thing. The sun is dying. However, it's not your sun. He pointed upward. High above the field of lilies, the sky began to crack. Not with code, not with blood. It cracked like an eggshell. And through the holes, I saw something that made my heart stop. Gigantic golden eyes were looking down at us. Each eye was larger than a continent. And a voice, ancient and terrifyingly calm, boomed through the atmosphere, shaking the very foundations of my existence. The incubation period is complete. Harvest the mother core. Suddenly, a massive metallic claw, miles wide, descended from the heavens, aiming directly for the spot where I stood. And the silver key in the senator's hand began to hum with a sound that I recognized. It was my daughter's laughter. The sky didn't just break, it screamed. That massive claw wasn't coming to save us, it was coming to collect. I reached for the silver key, my fingers trembling. The senator's face shifted one last time, settling on the face of my dead husband. He smiled, but his teeth were rows of flickering LEDs. "Don't you see, Sarah? You aren't the prisoner. You're the soil." As my fingers brushed the cold metal of the key, the laughter of my daughter stopped abruptly. It was replaced by a high-pitched, agonizing whistle. The field of white lilies didn't just wither. They inverted, turning into jagged shards of obsidian that sliced through my boots. The claw was seconds away now. Its shadow blotted out the light, casting the entire world into a suffocating artificial twilight. The mother core wasn't a part of the machine. It was the collective weight of every memory I had ever fought to keep. Every tear, every scream, every ounce of love. It had all been distilled into a single, glowing point of energy beneath my ribs. "They don't want your data," the senator whispered, his voice dissolving into the roar of the descending harvester. "They want the raw emotion. It's the only fuel that can bridge the gap between their world and ours." The claw hit the ground miles away, but the shockwave threw me backward. The ground didn't just shake, it liquefied. I saw the millions of other Sarahs in their chairs being sucked upward, pulled into the sky like sparks from a bonfire. They weren't being rescued. They were being consumed. I looked down at the key in my hand. It wasn't silver anymore. It was pulsing with a dark, rhythmic violet light. It was a detonator. "If you turn it," the senator's voice echoed in my mind, "the harvest ends. But so does every version of your daughter. Forever." I looked up at the giant golden eyes in the sky. One of them blinked, and in that brief moment of darkness, I saw a reflection on the surface of the cosmic pupil. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't a monster. It was a nursery. And the mother core, inside me, was the only thing keeping the cradle warm. I felt a cold, metallic pressure against my spine. I turned slowly. Mark was standing there. But he wasn't Mark. His skin was gone, replaced by the same golden armor as the entities in the sky. He held a blade made of frozen light to my throat. "Give it to me," he said, his voice a perfect replica of my own, "or I'll let you watch what happens when the cradle goes cold." Then from the hole in the sky, a new sound emerged, a baby's first cry, loud enough to crack the world in half. The cry didn't just vibrate in the air, it vibrated in my marrow. It was a sound of absolute bottomless hunger. This wasn't a nursery for life as I knew it. It was a hatchery for something that had outlived the universe. Mark leaned in, his light blade singing against my skin. "Do you hear that, Sarah? That's the sound of 1,000,000,000,000 years of evolution waiting for your permission to wake up. Give me the core. Give me the key." I looked up past the golden eyes into the deep architecture of the nursery. It was a graveyard of civilizations repurposed into an incubator. The mother core in my chest throbbed in sync with that horrific cry. My heart wasn't a heart anymore. It was a pilot light, and I was the only thing keeping the darkness from swallowing everything that remained. The senator's voice drifted through the static in my head. The millions of others. The other Sarahs. They already gave up. They chose the dream. They chose to believe the lie because the truth was too heavy to carry. "Why are you different?" "Because I remember the smell of rain," I whispered. The golden entity wearing my husband's face laughed. It was a hollow, mechanical sound. Rain is just a chemical reaction. Grief, however, grief is a constant. It's the only thing that doesn't decay. That's why we chose you. Your capacity for sorrow is infinite." The sky began to fold inward. The giant claw reached the ground, and instead of crushing it, the claw began to unzip the reality of the field. The lilies, the dirt, the air. It was all being sucked into a central vortex. The Sarahs in their chairs were being processed, their memories stripped away like bark from a tree, leaving only the raw, white-hot energy of their pain to fuel the hive. I looked at the key in my hand. The violet light was blinding now. It wasn't just a detonator, it was a bridge. If I turned it to the left, I would release the core, fueling the birth of whatever was in that sky. If I turned it to the right, I would trigger a feedback loop that would vaporize the nursery, the entities, and every fragment of my own soul. "You won't do it," the entity hissed. "You can't kill her again." From the swirling chaos of the vortex, a figure emerged. It was my daughter, but she was different. She was translucent, her body composed of flickering screen glitches and starlight. She walked toward me, her feet leaving no footprints on the liquefied ground. "Mommy?" she said, her voice echoing with the weight of 1,000 voices. "I'm so cold. Please let me in." She reached out, her hand passing through the blade of light as if it were nothing. She didn't go for my face. She didn't go for a hug. Her small shimmering hand wrapped around the key, her fingers overlapping mine. "It's time to wake up, Mommy," she whispered. But as she spoke, her eyes flickered. For a split second, the blue of her irises vanished, replaced by the same golden mechanical gears that turned in the sky. She wasn't trying to save me. She was the final fail-safe. And then, I felt it. Not a hand on the key, but a sharp, stabbing pain in my back. I looked down. A second silver key was being pushed through my chest from behind. I turned my head with a sickening crack and saw myself. Another Sarah, her eyes wide with madness, her hands trembling as she forced the second key into my spine. "One to unlock the soul!" The other Sarah screamed, her voice breaking into a jagged sob. "And one to bleed it dry." The sky didn't just scream then. It began to laugh. And the cradle in the sky? It began to open. The cold was absolute. 2 keys were now buried in my body, one in my hand, one in my spine. I was a lock being forced open from both sides. The sky cradle didn't just open, it unraveled. Behind the golden gears and the shifting geometry, there was nothing but a great emptiness, a mouth the size of a galaxy, ready to feed on the harvest of 1 billion broken hearts. "The cycle is complete," the entity with Mark's face whispered. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the void. "The mother core is primed. Thank you for your sorrow, Sarah. It was delicious." My double, the other Sarah, leaned into my ear. Her breath smelled like ozone and old graves. "Let it go," she hissed. "If we die, the pain stops. If we give them the core, the memories stay forever. We can live in the dream. We can see her again." I looked at the shimmering glitch that claimed to be my daughter. She held my hand, her fingers cold as liquid nitrogen. "Mommy, please, just turn the key. Let the world wake up." They were all lying. The entity wanted my power. My double wanted an end to the hurt. And the daughter was just a beautiful bait. I felt the core in my chest. It wasn't a battery, it wasn't a pilot light. As the 2 keys vibrated against each other inside my ribs, I realized what it actually was. It was a mirror. The entities didn't have their own energy. They were parasites of consciousness. They fed on the infinite capacity for sorrow because they had nothing of their own. If I gave them my grief, they lived. If I gave them my death, they won. I didn't turn the key to the left. I didn't turn it to the right. I pulled. I grabbed the silver key protruding from my own chest and the one digging into my spine, and I twisted them into each other. I didn't aim for the sky. I aimed for the center of my own being. "What are you doing?" the Mark entity screamed. His golden eyes flickered. For the first time, I saw fear in them. "I'm not giving you my grief," I whispered, blood bubbling in my throat. "And I'm not giving you my soul." "Then what is left?" the other Sarah wailed, her form beginning to dissolve into gray smoke. "The truth," I said. "The rain. The messy, short, unimportant reality of a life that doesn't need to last forever to matter." I snapped the keys together. The feedback loop wasn't a scream. It was a silence so loud it shattered the nursery. The lilies turned to ash. The golden gears ground to a halt and began to rust in seconds. The sky cradle didn't descend. It evaporated like a bad dream hitting the morning sun. The daughter vanished first, then the senator, then the other Sarah. Finally, Mark looked at me. The gold was gone from his eyes. He looked like the man I loved just for a second. "You'll be alone," he warned, "in the dark, with nothing." "Good," I said. "At least the dark is real." I felt the core shatter. The white-hot energy didn't explode outward. It imploded, pulling the entire artificial reality into the tiny space where my heart used to be. The nursery, the hive, the trillion years of evolution, all of it sucked into a single point of non-existence. The light was blinding. Then it was gone. I opened my eyes. I wasn't in a field of lilies. I wasn't in a lab. I was lying on cold, wet pavement. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust and salt. Above me, the sky wasn't gold or black. It was a dull, beautiful gray. Rain began to fall, small, cold drops hitting my face. I reached for my chest. There was no metal, no core, just a steady, fragile heartbeat. My hand was shaking, but it was my hand. I sat up. I was in an alleyway somewhere in a city I didn't recognize. Across the street, a neon sign flickered. Open. I didn't have a key. I didn't have a mission. I didn't have her. But as I stood up, my legs weak and my vision blurring, I felt the rain soaking through my clothes. It was cold. It was real. The nightmare was over. The gods were dead. And for the first time in 1,000,000,000,000 years, the world was finally quiet. I took a step forward, and then another. I walked out of the shadows and into the rain.